Welcome to OpenFrame, a podcast by Pixieset, the place for photographers and other creatives to have inspiring, honest, and uplifting conversations.
How are you doing? How are you this morning?
I am doing fine, and I'm going to be extremely rude and have one more sip of coffee before we start.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I have my cup here as well. Judy, I'm so excited, and I'd love for our listeners to have like a little, just to hear a little bio about you, like your background in photography, what led you to do the work you do today, your favorite ice cream flavor, whatever you want to share.
I also need to explain that I go off on tangents. As something reminds me of something else. You need to wave at me, and that means stop and let me continue, because you're asking me about my life, and I'm old, probably older than your mother and possibly older than your grandmother. So I find it hard to summarize 40, 50 years of life in one answer. I grew up in Houston, Texas, in the United States. Okay. I used to talk like this. And I moved to Canada in 1973. When were you born?
In 85.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, I'm 76. My whole life has been about this. When I was a teenager, I would go on trips. I'd take pictures that we call me at the park, me at the zoo, me at your birthday party, me at. And I kept the ones I liked and had albums. And as I went through university, I studied, my undergraduate degree is in psychology and cultural anthropology. That becomes very relevant in my work, because there's so many aspects of visual communication that are culturally determined. So put that aside. I then married, ended up in graduate school in northern New York State in the United States. And I was getting a master's degree in counseling. And the school had a darkroom, because back then, before the internet and before everything, you would take film, you would develop it, you would go in the dark room, you'd put all these chemicals in trays, and you'd take a piece of paper and you'd expose it in the dark, and you'd end up with the photograph. And so I loved the magic of watching a photograph appear in front of me from this container of fluid. And so I started getting more into it. Never had thought of how the two parts of me interacted or not. And then after that, still in Texas, we were planning to immigrate to Canada. We did it legally, and we're waiting for the application. I did work at a drug crisis center, counseling people with addictions. And nearby was a coffee shop that used to put exhibitions on the wall, and they said, "Would you like to hang some of your photos here?" And I said, "Sure," because I've never studied photography itself. So when I was doing all this work and when I hung my first exhibition, I thought that if I sat around and listened to people talking about the pictures, I could learn what made them good or not. And somebody could say, well, the person's not in the center, or it's too contrasty. And then I would learn art tips. Instead, I heard the most amazing things, because I was sitting there with a cup of coffee at one of the tables. They didn't know I was the photographer. And my photos never have titles. They always have questions, because I have no way to know what the viewer is seeing and how they're making sense of my photograph, even though I think I know it so well. Beautiful picture of my then husband and our dog. The dog's trying to get some sandwich out of his hand, and a woman says, "Oh my God, he's going to bite that man," because she had been attacked by a dog when she was young. And her interpretation of my photo, it completely astounded me. She was not right, although she was right for herself. Yeah. I got very curious about the psychological component that people look at a photograph and the meaning of the photograph is not on the surface of the photo. The meaning is interpreted instantly by a viewer who's looking at the photo through all the filters of the past history of their life. Yeah. And so I got really curious, and I started, I would walk up and go, oh, yeah. Why do you think the photographer included this picture? And they would tell me, and I'd say, well, what's your favorite? Or which one don't you like? What would you like to change? This one you said you don't like. What would you like to change? And I explored and explored out of my instinct as a therapist, a counselor, a mental health practitioner. How is it that they are telling me about my own photo so differently than I see it? Now, I hate to tell you this, but this happens every time you or any other photographer shows someone a photo. You have no way to know if they're seeing what you're expecting them to see. And most often they are not. And this is a fact that I give lectures in international. I just was speaking to a photo gallery in Hungary. And last week I gave a lecture to the university in Montreal, telling people that we have some basic assumptions about photographs that are not true. No matter what the photographic art critics tell you about, I can tell you how to deconstruct this photo. No, they can only tell you how they do it. So that all went on. I moved to Canada. I started working particularly with children who are from a different culture, Indigenous, Aboriginal, Native, depending on what your country calls people who were here before we ever got there. And all of them were deaf. And that is because I am fluent in the deaf sign language. It's not a problem for me to communicate with my hands and reach people who cannot hear. And I would go visit them, and I have a camera, and these are children. These are between 6 and 10 years old, that I was being paid to simply connect with, try to understand them in a way that their teachers or foster parents, because they're not living at home. They were brought to the city of Vancouver, Canada, which is where I've been living for the last 35, 40 years. And these are children from way up north. They'd probably never even seen a city, much less know why they can't go home. And so they were pretty disturbed, and I would be taking them out for a walk or just playing or whatever to learn more about what are the problems they're having in understanding this world that somebody brought them to. So I had to see the world through their eyes and hear the stories that they see when they look at a picture of a shopping mall or something. And by 1975, I realized that they loved looking at my pictures, and they would tell me stories that told me about them and how they made sense out of, is that, I'll give you an example. One of the kids I worked with a lot, we went to a park one day, and she'd been telling me about her mother, and her mother is nice, but she doesn't like to be with her. It's a bit confusing. And so I said, let's take pictures of good mothers. We'll walk around the park, we'll swing, we'll play, here's a camera, only the little instant camera, not a Polaroid, but one of the $10 cameras that you could break and it didn't matter. And I said, I'll take pictures of good mothers and you take pictures of good mothers. So let's see what we get. And we did. And I was very surprised, because what she showed me, she could not tell me. Now, this is not about me teaching you how to read other people's photos. You cannot do that. There is no fortune telling or tea leaf reading. The photo in and of itself does not have a story until the viewer puts it there. And any viewer, including the one that created it, is going to have a different story. So she showed me her photos, and I showed her mine, and I said, how did you know that that's a good mother? And in all of her photos, the good mothers were within arm reach of their child. The bad mothers were over there on a park bench watching from a distance, still looking at the child, but not able to touch her. And I said, what's the difference? And she said, too far, not safe. Now, we went into discussions about possible abuse, blah, blah, blah. I'm still giving you my intro, so I have to be concise here as possible.
I love it.
So this is where it started. And in 1975, by total accident, I found out there was a magazine being published in Vancouver about photography being used as an agent of change. And that phrase still continues today. It's often called social action photography or whatever, but it's using photography as an agent of change. And my use of it is as an agent of change to help people improve their lives, improve well-being, understand themselves or other people better. And that is the heart of my work. And I got published. It's the first article anywhere in the world with the word phototherapy in the title. And it's not two words, it's one word. And photo has a capital letter, therapy has a capital letter, because I wanted to show their equal balance. In 1982, I opened an office. I was licensed as a psychologist by then, and I opened the PhotoTherapy Center in Vancouver, Canada, that served me as a private office for doing therapy, as well as starting to collect the archives, the publication. This is before computers.
Yeah.
I've got my first computer the second year I was at my office. I ended up later writing a book on that computer. It was a Mac 512, an Anytime 512K.
I don't even know what that is.
A megabyte is 1,000 kilobytes.
Right.
So every chapter was a little floppy disk that I put in the computer, and I worked on that chapter. And if I thought, did I say that already? I had to take the disk out, put in another disk and check. And this is how life was before big computers and internet. So everything that I got into in my office, all the research I did, all the conferences I went to, all the articles I read were in my office files, and they predate the internet. So my center contains boxes and boxes of things that people can't find when they do an internet search. Yeah. And I'm trying to find an archive repository to donate these to, because I'm like a human Wikipedia. I know where people are doing what, I know who did it first, and I'm going to die someday, and this stuff is not accessible. So I continued with the PhotoTherapy Center, but I also continued as a photographer, taking pictures of why do you take pictures? Nadia, why do you take pictures?
I don't think there's just one reason, but if I would have to make it short and concise, I take pictures. I take pictures. What I love the most about photography is the connection with one person.
No, I'm not asking about your work, taking pictures of clients, of people. I want to know, when you go out with a camera on a holiday, why do you take pictures? If you go out on a walk and you say, oh, I need to get that on my phone, why do you take pictures?
To freeze that moment for myself, to remember it later on.
Exactly. To freeze the moment in time. That's a sentence in my book. To freeze a moment in time, to keep it forever, because it feels special to you.
Yeah.
Someone else can look at it and go, well, what's the picture of the tree? And you know why. It's unconscious, but you know why. So I started publishing articles in anthropology journals, psychology journals, child care counseling journals, and I kept taking pictures of things that I wanted to keep in my mind, in my heart. And I had an exhibition in 1984 for the Visual Literacy Association conference, a gallery in Vancouver, a formal photo gallery. And instead of titles, the psychiatrist and I, who both did the work, we hung photos. We went around with a tape recorder and a microphone saying, which of these pictures of people, who would you like to meet the most? And we interviewed. We did live interviews. People didn't mind. Obviously, we were recording. And we wrote it up later about how amazing it is that photo galleries organize shows. They ask for a proposal of what to exhibit, and a photographer chooses what to submit. And then the gallery person decides what to include. And then the gallery person decides where to hang what. And the photographer walks in and like, why is it in this order? They didn't ask me. It doesn't go that way. All of the interactions between a professional photographer and a gallery are totally biased by everything I teach, and they don't know it. Mm-hmm. So I often walk out of photo galleries out the door and go, what did I just see? Why did I just see that? And I didn't get what they wanted me to get. So all of this to say, by 1993, I decided to write a book. Don't ever do that. It consumed years of my life. That book is now in 3rd edition. It has been translated into Korean, Russian, Italian. It's currently being translated into Chinese, and we're being considered for Greek and Spanish right now. The book, and I want to tell people who are watching this that at the end of this, there's going to be a 1-page PDF on the screen that you can take a picture of that tells you where to find more information about phototherapy, about me, about my publications. You can download all my publications for free from my website. Facebook group, 9,000 active members that had to be approved to get in that Facebook group. So this is sort of the path. I start something, I write about it. It gets more complicated, I get more interested, I write a book. And then I start teaching. And then people pay me to come and teach, which is nice. And I still was having psychology clients where I was using these techniques, and I'll explain them in a minute, to help people when I couldn't quite understand what the problem was that want them to see a psychologist, or when they just couldn't explain it in words. And I would say things like, well, tell me about your childhood. What do you want to know? How do you feel about your mother and father divorcing? It was okay. You know, you can't get in because the feelings are protected and they're unconscious. And so they would look at photos on my wall. I feel just like that guy, you know, off we'd go in a conversation. What this is photo-based techniques to use when mental health professionals are working with their clients to help those people understand better why they're having the kind of problems they're having. And they need to get that at a conscious level. Yeah. They need to get it at a conscious level. And you're right, it is fascinating. It continues to fascinate me 50 years later. I should retire, but I love this work, and I'm so curious about, you know, we can bring it into the present, but I'm supposed to be telling you about my life. And I think I should stop and say, I've done all that. I'm still doing stuff. What's your next question? You know, you want me to explain phototherapy? What do you want me to talk about next?
I'm just so fascinated, even by the way you, by being observant and by paying attention, how people, like, from obviously being like a psychologist and a therapist and doing photography like on the side, and then just observing people's reactions almost by accident. You blended these things together just because you paid attention to what was happening. That is so amazing. I absolutely love that story.
It's a story that encourages you and anyone else seeing this to trust your gut level instinct. I did not say I want to find out about this. I proceeded to live my life and go, oh my God, gee, wow. And my brain was thinking, well, why is this happening or whatever? It was by accident.
Yeah, that's
exactly. It was my entire career started from that 1975 article. And the way I found out about that article was that the man that delivered our mail to our house each day saw what I was doing. I was writing stuff and I had index cards all over because there was no computers. You had to start writing. And he, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing an article about my work helping kids with photography. Oh, my brother is putting out a magazine called Photography as an Agent of Change. Maybe I should talk to him about you.
Crazy.
If I wasn't home that day, if I wasn't doing that work, this is the synchronicity of life. And the older you get, the more you need to trust it.
That's
like the photographer telling you my name. I mean,
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is, it blows my mind, absolutely. And when I first found your website and like that photographer told me about you, I thought, when I heard phototherapy, I thought, my first obvious thought was, oh, it's probably like, you know, people using pictures of yourself for therapy or for healing. And then I read a bit on your website and I watched a YouTube video where you were doing a lecture. And also from what you just said, I realized then that actually, oh, it's using also just other photographs, random, that have nothing to do with people to open people up. And that's really interesting. And I'd love to, for you to explain to like our listeners, like the difference between phototherapy techniques that you mentioned on your website and therapeutic photography, because there's a difference between the two.
Okay, so first of all, phototherapy is not a noun. It's not a kind of therapy. Phototherapy techniques, and I never say phototherapy without the word techniques, every time I teach. Somebody calls themselves a phototherapist and I go, what is that?
Okay.
Oh, well, I use photo. No, you don't. You have skills. You're trained to be a professional therapist. You have a license. You have a certificate, and you use every tool you can. If you want to have them draw something, or you want to use hypnosis, or you want to have them do some music therapy, whatever. This is not a kind of therapy. It's 5 techniques that interact. And I teach people the additional uses of the kind of photos, because phototherapy techniques are based on photos of you. The 5 positions between a person and a photograph. Photos taken of you, photos that you take, photos that you take of yourself, called self-portraits or now selfies. And those are different. We can get into that at some point. Family and what I call photobiographical narratives, more than one photo arranged to tell a story by the person who created the album. And it may not be the same story for each person in it. Your story of your family may not be your mother's album story of your family. Underneath those, there's nothing else. It's a photo you take, a photo someone else takes of you, a photo you take of yourself, and what you do with them in terms of family history. That's it. Okay. The 5th, which like the fingers on a hand, they cannot do much without the thumb. And the thumb is called photoprojective process or technique. Okay. And what that means is anytime you look at any of these photos, you're projecting. You're putting on the thin piece of paper with detail, visual details on its surface. You're projecting what it means, why it was taken, whether you want a copy, what is the story of that photo? And that's all coming from inside you. For a therapist, that's a gold mine. Because you bring me a photo, I truly don't know. I have to ask you, tell me about it. What is it? Was there something you'd like to change? How about the difference between photos other people take of you and photos you take of yourself? Are there some patterns? Which ones do you like? Why? Every single question is not what they call these days a prompt. These are not little magic trips that you do in front of an audience. When I say why or what or how, my next question is almost always, why do you think that is? I want to know the reason behind. Nadia, think of 2 or 3 pictures of yourself, one you like, one you don't like. Just think of them for a minute and try to figure out what the differences are, and the one you don't like, what you'd have to do to make it more to your liking. You know those things, you just don't have words for them. Okay. And so what I do is, I'm a therapist. You're here to see me for a reason. And in the case of psychologists in Canada, you're paying me. Some therapists are part of your medical plan. If someone's going to pay a stranger to tell their stories to, it's my responsibility to work with them toward what is the outcome goal. Why are you seeing me? How are you going to know when you don't need to see me anymore? And we talk about the goal of each session that leads toward the bigger goal. Once I know what I want to find out in your next session, if I can do it by words, I'm not going to work any harder. Tell me how you feel about your mother. You know, if they can say, oh, well, I can be it, don't work any harder. But most of them can't. And you want to say something like, what's your favorite picture of your mother? Are you in it with her? What about pictures of the two of you? Do you always stand as I just explore? I have no idea what the answer is going to be. I do have professional training to know what to do with that answer, how to link it to the next step of the therapy process. So phototherapy techniques are used by professionally trained mental health counselors, therapists, psychologists, whatever, to help their clients deal with emotional problems that are hard to get into through words alone. I did that for 10 years. I wrote a book, whatever, and I started hearing from people that, you know, I'm a special education teacher in school, and I use some photos to do something with this child that he could never do before. Or, you know, I work in an alcohol and drug treatment program, and we have a photo taking group just to give them something to do. And oh my God, you should know what happened the last time. And these are not trained mental health professionals. You cannot, when you walk into a therapist office, you see that they have the training to know how to handle the conversation they're going to start with you, and you're safe. And they know how, if you start going off the deep end with them, they know how to bring you back. Okay. Your local librarian, the teacher of your child, they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to do therapy. And so actually, you're talking to the person who invented the term therapeutic photography, presented it at the international conference in Finland in 2011 with the two other sort of pioneers. Everybody in the world was starting to do this stuff. I am not the only person. Okay. I'm one of the first published, but there's a psychologist in Ohio, a psychiatrist in Ontario, who I met at the first conference, and we started laughing because when I gave a presentation, the next person stood up and said, she just gave my presentation, never mind. It was like a family. And so the three of us were at this conference, International Phototherapy Conference in Finland. There have been lots of these conferences. And we went to dinner the night before, and I said, I want to do something new, and I need your permission because I don't work alone. I want to take phototherapy and reverse it into therapeutic photography. And I want that to be when people are using photos to help themselves or other people in their lives in a situation where the skills of a therapist are not needed. They don't need a therapist. There's nothing wrong with them. They just want to get on better with their mother's new husband. Or, you know, I lived on the street for so long and had addictions, and now I've got a house and I need to figure out what's normal, and maybe you can tell me what to go take pictures of so I can study better how people act on the bus or something. You don't need a therapist for that. And the adaptation of the 5 phototherapy techniques for use by anybody of any age, including people who work with blind people and people on the autistic spectrum, can show people how to use photos to improve their lives and improve how they feel about themselves and to communicate better with others. And that's called therapeutic photography. It's the same 5 techniques, they're just used differently. If I pick up a pen to write something, and you take the pen and write something, It's the same tool.
Yeah.
It's just used differently. So that's the, okay. So on this continuum, phototherapy techniques, therapeutic photography techniques, okay, they're not opposites. They're a continuum along which every practice, every photo-based helping, healing practice can be positioned. And about 5 years later, when I was opening a conference in Perugia, Italy, for a social action photography festival, I realized that this continuum isn't enough. And we took therapeutic photography and divided it into 2 parts. The first is when people are helping themselves, and the help is in the sessions doing the photo taking and talking. Social action photography is when a group of people get together to use photos to share about their life. I'm thinking refugees, prisoners, women with breast cancer, whatever, who say, I don't really need therapy, but I want people to understand what it's like to go through being the only Black person in a school in England. You know, what do you want to know about my life that can help you understand me better? And those social action projects are happening everywhere, everywhere. Yeah. There's even a research method called photo voice that you might want to check into that do this. Hundreds of projects all over the world, photovoice.org. And so we established that sort of triad. And now in the middle is people who are professional life coaches or business coaches who are using photos in their work, helping people improve their lives through coaching. And I mean, that's why it's so nice that this is not a fixed, permanent
system
collection of terms.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I hope that helps. Did that answer you?
Yes. Thank you. That's so beautiful. And I was wondering, you know, the 5 elements, like when you do therapy or when people use it applied like on themselves, do you need all 5? Or I know you need the thumb, but like I was thinking, what if some people have no family photos?
Exactly. And does it bother them? I should not assume that's a problem. That's what I keep talking about. I am not the expert. I am the person asking the questions to learn more. Let's say you say, all my photos were burned up in a fire. I got out of Ukraine with my coat, nothing else, you know. And I would find out first whether is that a problem? Because if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. And if they say, oh my God, yes, I've lost. I mean, I just read about a fire downtown here where the people got out with their cat and a bunch of photos. Photos are often what people take in a hurry. You got 5 minutes to get out of your office, Nadia. What are you going to take with you? The hat, you know?
Yeah.
So having no photos, if it's a problem, then I design an assignment. Because phototherapy is not just looking at pictures in a therapist's office. It's also going out and taking pictures a therapist wants you to take, including bring back 5 pictures next week and show me what interests you. Very safe assignment. They have no idea where we can go in the session with that. But so I need to know what it is I want to accomplish as my outcome goal. And then I work backwards. What kind of photos can help me do that? Some people, I use all kinds of photos, all 5 techniques. I mean, I'm always using the thumb. I'm always using, tell me about the photo. I want to know how you see it. What is your story of it? But that could be an album, a selfie, or whatever. If I think it's important for therapy that they explore their family history and we can draw little family trees and stuff, let's put a photo with each thing on the family tree. Let's see who these people were and what have you inherited from them and do you look like them? If I don't need to explore their family, I'm not going to use family photos. I often am interested in how people see themselves in photos. Every time you see a picture of you, you are reversed from what you see in the mirror.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're taking a picture of yourself, you're seeing how other people would see you. Sometimes that's a bit of a shock to people. You also can work with photos that don't exist that you wish existed.
Oh,
You
that's
can work with
interesting.
imaginary photos, remembered photos. Okay, so you don't have any family photos. Which ones do you miss the most? Just take a pen and draw a little, the circle is the head. What's in the picture? When they look at the sketch, they see the picture in their mind. We can work with invisible pictures, remembered photos, imaginary photos. Let's say you won the lottery and you can do anything you want with your life. And the first thing you do is what? And I want to know what it's like for you to have a picture of yourself being rich somewhere on a beach. I also do it with people who are making changes. I work a lot with people with drug and alcohol addictions. And one of my favorite stories is a man who was sitting in front of me. I'm at my desk and I said, you and I both know that you can get out of this problem. It's hard. You have to want, it's not can't, it's won't. And once you decide that you do want to start doing something, when you can't, you've got a good excuse. You don't have to try. But once you want to start changing your life and you do want to do something, I take a picture of you today. You don't look so hot. You're pretty hungover and you're a little dirty clothes. How do you want to be? If I have a photograph of you in 5 years and you don't have your addiction anymore, what are you going to look like? And the guy said, excuse me, get off your chair. And he came to my desk and put his feet on the desk. Okay. And I took a picture for him. And here's today, here's 5 years. What's a picture going to look like in 1 year? What about 1 month? We can give him a goal attainment plan. That's visually.
Powerful. Yeah, that's visualization, basically. You're visualizing.
Well, not only that, but there's a concept in psychology called Transitional Object by a psychologist named Winnicott. You do not need to know this, but the photo, my husband long ago, I'm looking at the photo and it's of him. This is an object that represents him so that I can deal with him without him being there listening to my questions. With this object, I have something that used to be able to be called truth and fact. These days, Photoshop, not anymore. But if I have a picture of it, it happened. Now, anybody over 60 probably thinks like that, and the younger ones know better. But this object becomes a safe thing to talk about, the photo of your father trying to kill your brother. This is something that I can touch and hold on to like a child with a teddy bear. Yeah. To say, see, I have proof he didn't like me. And I'm going, tell me how you can see that. I can't see that. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It's your picture. Of course you're right. Show me how I would know that. And so you get into these things, and then you also work with when I don't need therapy anymore, it's going to be because I can now do this. Fine. You work with anything that is photo-based. And you also can do video therapy, because a video is actually a whole bunch of individual still pictures going by very quickly. I write about video therapy as well, and it's not just therapeutic filmmaking, it's the active use of video during a therapy session, but that's way too much topic for this conversation.
No, that's beautiful and so powerful about what you just said about the visualization and like people basically, yeah, looking into their future. That is amazing. Judy,
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment, because you just touched on something important, which is if I said to you, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? And you're exploring around in your mind, you're going everywhere. If I say, imagine a picture taken of you in 5 years, your mind goes rectangle.
Yeah, you know? It's so much more concrete and clear to imagine it as that is so good. I'm going to do that when we end this call. I'm going to imagine myself in a photo in 5 years.
Well, you see, in therapy, when somebody says, I want to be this, this, and that, and I have to say, how are you going to get that to happen?
Mm-hmm.
What are the steps? What's preventing you from doing that? Let's talk about the barriers. I need to design the photo-based questions from my knowledge about the psychology of what does this person need to realize in order to move forward with their life.
Yeah, beautiful. That is so powerful. I just love the power of pictures. It's incredible how powerful.
Me too.
Yeah,
I've been doing this for years and decades, and I still am fascinated.
Amazing. Never stop, please. And I love that you're doing this. And I love that I came across your name and your work. It's incredible. And I'd love to know from you some pointers. Like the 99% of people listening to this will be photographers, most likely. A few may be designers or whatever here and there. And as photographer, most of them will be people photographer, not landscapes or anything. Right. And as photographers, people photographers, we know, obviously we are a little bit familiar with people struggling in front of the camera, some people have really big issues, others, less. We're familiar with connecting with people during the shoot or before or after at such a level where they share really personal stuff. And most of us, though, are not licensed psychologists or therapists, right? Yeah, but because it's such an intimate act to take a photo of someone, of another person, sometimes it can get really the connection can be really intimate, and you talk about things, and but we are just the photographers. So where would you put, in which category would you put what we do, like portrait photography, and how could portrait photographer use this knowledge when handling their clients?
Well, you have to go back to what is a good portrait photograph that everyone is trying to put themselves into. And then you're into visual anthropology, cultural filters. Should I smile or not? Should I show cleavage or not? And who is going to be seeing the photo that I am creating this for? And if you were doing a portrait photograph for your sister, if you were going to get a portrait photo taken by a commercial photographer, and it's going to be for your sister for her birthday, is that going to be the same photo that you have that photographer take for your LinkedIn professional profile picture? No. Well, not usually. If you're having a selfie, which means in the moment, not prepared, didn't have to have it professionally done, and somebody puts it on their Facebook page without your permission, and somebody realizes, oh my God, that's my teacher being silly. I teach a course on who has the right to do what with whose photo. And I don't give answers because every country's different, every profession's different. You have a code of ethics for photographers, and it is not helpful for the kind of work I do, and possibly not for the depth that you're doing. I strongly recommend that any photographer that's doing what I call commercial work with paid clients, customers, have a form that people sign when they come in. I realize that the conversations about these photos might go a whole lot deeper than I expect, and I'm responsible for not letting that happen any deeper than I want. And I know that my photographer is not a mental health counselor, and that if I find, or she thinks I need more deep help with this, she'll give me some recommendations of how to continue. She is not responsible for my mental health during this session, something like that. Someday someone's going to sue you and say, you brought out all this stuff in me. No. and I can't sleep now. And you have to be able to say, I explained that to you at the beginning. So anyway, portrait photography has an outcome goal of a photograph that the client will want to keep and pay for. Yeah. You might want to explore with your customers, what is their outcome goal? What do they really want to see? They want to look how. Show me what how looks. Okay, I got a better idea now. Do you want people to see you smiling or not? And what's the difference? And maybe we should do both. And I can take a whole lot of proof shots, and you can go through them and choose what you want. Every portrait photographer I have ever known, including myself, takes 50, 60 shots, click, 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 and goes through and looks at them. And you know which ones are great. Oh my God, we have to have this one. And you give the same proof shots to your customer, and you already know the answer that's coming, because they often say, oh, I don't like that one. I like this.
Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah.
Now, what I used to do is I would print the ones they order, and just out of frustration, print 2 or 3 of the ones that I thought were best and let them see them side by side. It still didn't work. My idea of what is a good portrait photograph is not the same as the customers. They have been coached by media, advertising, merchandising, job interviews as to how they should look, and therefore how your photograph should present them. And those shoulds in life are very dangerous things.
Yeah.
And you need to find out, what are they wanting? What are they looking for? How will they know when the picture's correct? And ethically, maybe give them a couple of options that they didn't ask for, just to see, maybe they like them better. But the best kind of question, I mean, when I'm teaching is, let me ask you, Nadia, do you have a Facebook page?
I don't anymore. I only use it for like Facebook groups, because I'm a bit, I'm a bit tired of
Okay,
it.
but you used to have a Facebook page that had your face in the little circle. Do you have a LinkedIn account?
I do.
Okay. Are the photos of you the same? No.
No.
I already knew that. I already said that.
No, yeah.
And if I say why, you're getting into my stuff. Why would those be different? Well, this one should show the professional component of my life. I shouldn't be silly. People need to know they can trust me. You know, selfies and self-portraits, big difference. What you do with a professional photograph, you might want to ask your clients, are you going to be using this on Instagram or LinkedIn or Pinterest or, you know, any of those other things? Show me some pictures of other people in that platform presentation to see, show me what it is you're looking for, because you may have no idea of what they want the photo to look like, and you want them to pay you for them and not go, oh, these are horrible, and leave. Okay, you may want to sign a contract that you get paid for your time, whether or not they're buying any photos. Yeah. So, but you see, you have your own expectations and your own shoulds. You don't want it to be out of focus. They might like a little blurring if they got lots of wrinkles.
I like blurry photos too.
Yeah, I've been on your website.
Okay.
I've seen that first photo. I do my homework. Anyway, like I said, I can go for hours. I teach, or used to teach, a 7-day long, 8 hours a day intensive training. I get energized talking about this. I don't get tired. So you're going to have to keep track of the time.
That's beautiful. I love that. I feel the same way about photography, like in general, about my work. I feel like I don't think I will ever retire. Like, why would I? Like, I love photographing people. Why would there ever be a day when I'm like, I have to stop doing this. I can't do this anymore.
All right, answer me a question. Why do you photograph people, and why do you like it?
I think so. My whole life up until now, I've always like looked for a place to land and to belong and to connect, because growing up I didn't have that. And I think partly why I love photography is it gives me that connection to people. So it's also selfish. It's also for myself.
Why?
To make me feel like I belong somewhere with someone, to connect.
And how does it do that?
It makes me feel less alone. It makes me feel less lonely.
Okay, I don't want to become a therapist all of a sudden, but you see how I work. That's exactly how I work. I am the dumb person on my favorite answer when somebody is talking like you're touching on getting very deep, and we won't do that in this interview. I could talk about what does lonely mean to you. How do you know? I mean, are there any pictures of you being lonely and blah, blah. You can pay me for a session some other time. We can do this. I don't mind doing a demonstration for you. But the point is, it goes very deep, very fast. And the whole time you were telling me, I was watching you I swear you were looking at photographs in your mind. Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so if I gave you a blank piece of paper and said, here's a rectangle, what did that photo have in it?
Wow.
What you put in it are the things that matter. Things that don't matter, you don't put in, you don't see in photos. You know, was that 6 trees and which kind of trees? I don't know. It doesn't matter. What you were looking at were imaginary photos, and they answered your question, and then you had to translate it into words.
Oh, and that's so hard sometimes.
That's why I exist.
Beautiful. We're so grateful that you exist. Thank you so much, Judy. And my last question is, like, personally, I know it's kind of blurred with your work as well. It's hard maybe to separate it, but personally, what role has photography played in your life? Like in your journey, in your healing, maybe just like in your personal life?
It's an integral part of my personal life. And now with camera phones, I am known to all of my neighbors and friends and relatives that there's always a camera in my pocket. And what I say is, oh my God, I have to capture this moment. And what I told all of them, people that I know, is I'm going to photograph. I'll show it to you immediately. If you don't want, you delete it. My ethics with you are much more important than me needing to take a photo.
Yeah.
I need to take it. Whether I keep it or just remember it is up to you. Photography as an art for me is so impossible to define that photo art galleries often make no sense to me because they're trying to present the curator, the person who put the show together, their view of what good photographs on this topic should be. And I'm going to give you a very personal example, and it's happening right now. I do try to do photography and phototherapy work. To me, they're braided together. And another point that I will bring up is in a studio, you take pictures and they choose some and you have all of them. The worst thing in the world for phototherapy work is the delete button. Yeah. People erase, delete, remove. In the old days, it just went on those pictures that you didn't like and didn't want either got thrown away or they went under your bed in a big garbage bag. We could go back and visit them again. And when you revisit old photos, you have different filters. 100%. You've learned different shoulds.
Yeah.
And when we go back and look at old photos, I mean, there's a photo in my life, which I can send you a written story about, where doing something on my 60th birthday with a particular pose of my head in my hand and my arm on my waist, it completely confused me because it was such a powerful photo, and it wasn't. That I only realized when I went back through a family album that it was the exact same pose that I took when I was 4 years old and starting to act out as being, I want to do what I want to do. And my mother wanted me to be sweet and a little girl in ruffled dresses. And I told her I was going to be a cowboy, not a cowgirl. And I'm not trans, but the point being that you have these buried memories from photographs that you looked at as a child. And if the delete button means you can't go back, that's really sad to me.
Exactly.
So anyway, I'm going to tell you a very quick story. Quick story.
Please.
Right now, there is a photo competition in Italy, the city of Trieste, that had a call for submissions of photographs. I am on an e-blast list for the topic of art and education. And I get told about galleries that are hiring new directors. I get told about graduate programs where somebody's doing a study of, Mongolian art and photographs or whatever. And they had a call for submissions. And for the first time in 30 years, I looked at that and I thought, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I submitted 12 photos. And the reason I could do it is that the name of the event is called WOW, W-O-W, World of Women.
Okay.
And the description by the curator calling for the submissions was wide open. We're talking about the World of Women, International Women's Day, women of any age, any color, any gender, anything, women going through their daily lives anywhere in the world, of women of any age. And I have my favorite photos from, there's a couple of pictures in my home that I frame. How do you decide, if you're a photographer, how do you know which ones to frame and put on your wall? That's a horrible decision to have to make. I've got 500 zillion photos and I need 3 for my wall. But I went through my photos in my mind. I remember 2 or 3. I have a folder of good pictures of women, luckily. And I selected 12. And I have just heard that the first cut, everybody sends in a whole bunch of photos. We don't want that. We don't want that. We might want this. So at that first stage, they have written to say, we are considering for the exhibition and the award and the book, 10 of your 12 photos.
Wow.
We'll let you know. And so here I am talking to you about having entered a photo competition. We won't know, even when this podcast is done, whether I got anything awarded or included, but it's still part of my life. I take photos to help me remember the things that matter. Mm-hmm. And often I keep the photos, and often they're the only memories I have of people. I work a lot with people. The first 30 years of my work, I worked primarily with people of color who had AIDS. Okay, a lot of them were gay men, a lot of them weren't. But the point is, I worked with people who knew that within 2 years they would be dead. And that happened for over a decade. I got very familiar with people dying. And I learned very quickly, here's one tip for you and anybody listening, that if you find that people are wanting photographs of someone who is supposed to pass away soon, you don't want just photos of that person. You want photos of you with them, because it's your relationship with them that is going to be missed more than the person, the individual themselves. People don't, I've written about grief and bereavement phototherapy, and I always mention, take pictures with everything you love right now. Yep. Because you don't know what tomorrow's bringing. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Oh yeah, I agree 100% about the deleting, and what you just said. That's another very interesting rabbit hole to go down, down to, because I did wedding photography for 10 years before just quitting that and doing portraits, and it was so interesting to see that in terms of like legacy and what remains, because photos are the only thing that really remains from the wedding day. Everything else goes away. And I would always try to make my clients understand, and that's not just for wedding photography, that's for every photography. I think like photographs, the only thing that becomes actually more valuable the more time goes on, because the more time passes, you lose your memories, you lose people, and you have those photographs of these people, right? And suddenly, like, you would get emails from clients being, oh, my dad passed away, and I have this photo from the wedding of him with me, and it's priceless now. Like, I would pay triple everything the price that I paid to have, like, for this photo, because it's so priceless now that he's gone.
One of the things I wrote in my book that I use when I teach is sometimes we take photographs and we don't know why until later.
Yeah. Very true. It's so beautiful. I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that and that personal story. And I hope you get into the book and everything.
I'll let you know. People are so curious once they find out this exists. It's like they're thirsty and suddenly there's all these things to drink.
Absolutely. It was the same
Yeah.
for me when I found out about this work. I was like, that is so interesting. And it's also a responsibility being a photographer and obviously creating a safe space, but not being a therapist, and like, you know, trying to like keep it a safe place for people without
yeah. I have a suggestion of a person for you to interview, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to explain that on my website, as you probably discovered, the homepage, there's a link at the top to a summary of the website in different languages, and it's about 20 different languages. If you go to the page for phototherapy techniques, there's web page size information, but each of those has a link to download more information. You go to my bio and publications page. When you get past the ego part of Judy does this and this and this, there is a link to a PDF of all of my publications with hot links to download each of them for no cost, including the introductory chapter to my book for no cost. So I have not kept up with, now that there's Google, I have not bothered to provide reading lists to people anymore. But a lot of my publications happened before internet, before Google, before search engines. And you can have them for free if you just get that PDF. So there's things like that that it might be helpful to viewers. Now, also, if there are photographers who are doing what they would call therapeutic photography, join my Facebook group. We got everything there. We've got people who have no idea what therapy is, because it's a group for discussing phototherapy, therapeutic photography, photo art therapy, you know, social. That title is so long, Facebook made me make it smaller.
Amazing.
Okay.
I have the link. I will put the link to the Facebook group in the show notes for everyone. I joined as well.
Yeah, I want you, since you joined, to go there right now, today, look at the 2 recent posts by a photographer named Devon, D-E-V-O-N, Dadoly, D-A-D-O-L-Y. I think you're going to want to interview her.
Okay.
He is a photographer, a portrait photographer, who works with trauma-informed photography. She's not a therapist. She's got a website. It's very clear about what she does with people getting comfortable with their bodies as a first step of getting rid of some of the consequences of trauma. She's very well informed. She's doing a workshop. I'm blown away by her work, and I have no problem. I talk about all kinds of other people all the time. These are like all my grandchildren. They're all doing stuff. I didn't even know about her 2 weeks ago. So go check her out. And now I have to stop because I have another interview in 15 minutes.
Woo, you are busy.
I am. I love doing this.
Incredible.
I'm in a race with death. I'm going to do as much things as I can before I get any older.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Judy. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and just your personal story with us as well. Thank you so much, for your time. This was so valuable. Thank you.